I don't know, almost 3 months now. And they've been really popular and enjoyable for both myself and for other people. And today we are going to be uh, graced by the presence of Luthier Gary Lee. Garrett Lee, he is out in New Jersey. I know him very well. He is a fellow board member of the New York Classical Guitar Society. He's a wonderful builder of instruments. He's helped me with my guitars in the past. He's built Ben Verdery's guitar and Fred Hand's guitar, and they're friends of mine, so I've come across these instruments, and they're beautiful, stunning instruments. So I think we're in for a real treat today, and we get to talk to Gary, and it's not going to be so much an interview, although we can find plenty of things to talk about, but rather it's an opportunity for you to ask some questions to Luthier. So all those things you may have wanted to ask over the years, but perhaps you didn't know, you didn't have someone of this level of expertise. So, I did a little photo shoot with my guitars yesterday because I'm creating images for the cover of our new duets book that is coming out very soon. And I was cleaning the fretboards of my guitars because I didn't want them all cruddy in the photos. And I was thinking, I need to think again, how do I clean the fretboard effectively? And I mean, so little things like that. Gary is such a wealth of information and experience. So it's a real joy to have him on the show. Hi, everyone. Thank you for saying hello in the chat. Lee's already yawning. He's had enough already. He says, yawn, morning from Brisbane. No, I'm just joking. He's obviously in Australia and in another time zone, but I appreciate you tuning in, Lee. Cindy from Southern California. Hi, Jeff. Hi, great to see you. Brent, thanks once again. I wonder, Jeff, there's a few people here who might be vying for the best attendance record of these live sessions. Drew, Jeffrey. Oh, Jeffrey, hi. Jeffrey is also out in New Jersey and is another member of the New York Classical Guitar Society board, so it's great to have him here. Lucien, Jim, May, thank you everyone for coming and saying hello. And also for those who go on Facebook, not that there's anything wrong with that, but most of the chat and the conversation goes on the YouTube page for Classical Guitar Corner. If you are wondering, some people wonder, how do we find out about these ahead of time? Well, first of all, we've been doing these sessions at 4 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. I've been much more regular with this than the podcast, to be honest. And I also send out an email ahead of time, about an hour or two ahead of the live stream, and you can go to classicalguitarcorner.com/live, and that will get you on that particular list that gets sent out an email ahead of time. Ryan said that any questions I have are extremely novice, so I'm hoping people will ask some more educated questions. I hope to buy a concert guitar sometime in the next year. Ryan, that's very kind of you to consider others, but I think your questions will be just as valid as anyone else's, especially if you're buying an instrument. I mean, there's so many questions there, and I think they're all very valid. Of what should I be looking for? What kind of questions do I ask the luthier or the dealer? How should it be transported? I mean, there's so many questions there. Please do feel free to ask them. No questions, no bad questions here. So great to have truss rod or no truss rod. These are all great questions. Gary's going to be able to answer all of them. I'm actually a little bit on easy street today, which is nice because Gary will be in the hot seat. What else has been going on? I'm just going to keep chatting for another few minutes as the people come in. I have been really enjoying composing. Most of the time these days I spend sort of almost doing admin type things and obviously teaching as well, but I've been composing some duets for the duet book that's coming out, and I was so delighted to have one of the duets performed in our member challenge. So we have 4 member challenges a year, and the most recent one was where members paired up and played duets with one another. And we have all these duets ready to go because we've got 40 odd duets in this new graded book, which we've been working on for over a year, well over a year. And so we had these duets ready to go, and we matched people up inside the academy, and people just teamed up and worked together. And they actually recorded and played these duets in this period of lockdown in different parts of the world. They managed to actually play this music together, and it's really outstanding and successful, much more successful than I had hoped or thought. And Chris and Scott undertook a piece that I wrote, and I'd never heard that piece played before, and it was such a joy, such a thrill to hear a piece of music played that I'd written. And so I was really inspired by that, very grateful for it, and I've been writing a lot since I heard that first recording. It's nice to find a new avenue. Maybe you find a new composer, maybe you find a new instrument, maybe, it's just nice to have something you get excited about, some variety. So that was what happened on the weekend. So we already have a couple of questions, which is great. So Jeff, thank you for preloading some questions here. Please, if I lose them in the chat, please feel free to write them again if I don't address them. He's asking about double top. Doesn't matter if Cedar's outside of Spruce. Yeah. Oh, Dave. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I sent out the new one for Dave and Nikki to have a listen to. I'm actually going to be doing a project with Evita with this new duet where she's going to do a dance video to it, which should be a bit of fun. And Jeff had another question. Does a 2 or 3 piece back make a difference in the sound? Oh, great. Okay. Well, it sounds like everyone's in, even have a few questions ready to go. So let's give Mr. Gary Lee a call.
Hey there.
Hi.
You see me?
There you are. Thank you for joining us. We've got people from all over the world tuned in. As you know, Gary's been in the chat a few times saying hello, so he knows the drill.
I've never had so many people in the workshop before.
Right.
I mean, it's literally stuffed to the gills in this workshop.
So yeah, well, first of all, could you introduce yourself a little bit, make a little bit of background for people that may not know you? I mean, because a lot of people from the academy would have seen you teach the course inside the academy that we filmed several years ago in that very studio. But as you know, there's people from all around the world. So maybe you could give us a little bit of background about when you started building and the time span with that and where you are now.
I'm seated about 20 miles away from Simon. I'm west of Manhattan, so almost a direct shot over to Simon if I go east. I've been building classical guitars primarily since 1999 when I started as a hobby. And a lot of builders in the United States start as hobbies, and they come from usually technical backgrounds. My background is in biochemistry, and it was always, guitar was always in my life somehow. I never played great, but I started playing guitar at 7. And one day when I was in my day job, and I was living in St. Louis at the time, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to build a guitar? Because I think I have the temperament for it. And temperament becomes something that's really huge when building a guitar, that you have enough concentration, but relaxed enough to allow yourself to make mistakes. So I am pretty much self-taught. And at that time, 20 years ago, the internet was just exploding with new information of how to build classical guitars, whereas before it was very limited, or in the US, schools for guitar building is pretty limited. But because I have a scientific background, I'm able to synthesize information pretty well. And as a kid, I did woodworking projects. Yes, it's hard to believe that my parents allowed me to use a table saw unsupervised, but they were very creative people too. And so it was just natural for me to do something creative, technical, and it really did feed the technical side of my curiosity as a scientist. And so in about 2006, I went full-time. I transitioned from research science to guitar building full-time, which is It's one thing to build as a hobby, but to do it professionally is quite a jump. And something told me that I had the tools to do it, not just on the technical side, the love for it, but then also people skills. Interacting with musicians is a big part of building guitars professionally. And I love that part. So I love being part of community.
Yeah, from what I've experienced myself and also witnessed with other people, you're very generous with your time and your information. You've often given your time at society meetings where you sort of, if there's something very small or minor, you'll have a look at it and maybe even work on it on the spot. And you've been teaching a lot, traveling around. And before we go, because I don't want to forget about this because I think it's really interesting, but before we go around your workshop and take some questions, could you tell us about this project you've been involved in uh, with Peabody School?
Yes, and I have prepared a little bit. Part of the scientist in me is preparation. So I knew that from the past podcast you had a question on that, or you touched upon that. So I was the luthier in a team that was started by Saurabh Bastep-Gray, who is a professor in the School of Medicine and also a professor in the Peabody Institute at the Johns Hopkins University. And she is interested in stress injury in music performance. She's trained as a neurologist. And so this joint appointment has really fostered her ability to develop a guitar. It's always been her dream to develop a guitar that could sense the left-hand force applied to individual strings. And I'm just a small part of this project that's been going on for many, many years. But the technology came to the point where force sensors could be engineered so that at each string fret intersection, a force sensor that is mimicking a fret can sense the actual amount of force that your left-hand fingers are pushing down in real time. And the way that it works is the Johns Hopkins engineer students came up with these levers that you can buy commercially that the top of it could look like the dome of a fret. And this arm, when it's pushed down on this with the string, it can sense the distance that lever moves. And then in this top view, each of these different intersections is wired by integrated circuit to a USB port that goes to a laptop computer. And the output that these brilliant engineering students came up with is graphical. So it looks like Guitar Hero in real time.
Right.
And they color-coded the force in maybe 4 levels of red being high alert, too much force, down to very subtle movements. And so it's been about a year since the prototype was completed. And maybe you should have Saurabh come on and tell you about the data analysis, because that could be really, really fascinating. Because there are applications where you can coordinate and figure out where the force applied with the left hand is coincident with sound.
Yeah, I mean, that would be amazing to have. Do you call it biomechanical feedback? Is that what it would be sort of called?
Yes, that would count as a type of biomechanical feedback.
I mean, that would be amazing to, yeah, just to see how that would help adapting the process, adapting the technique on the fly. Because I think people actually, players are quite adaptable quite quickly. It's a matter of instilling habit. So I'd be very curious to talk more about that subject. So, well, thank you for showing that. I hadn't seen that diagram before, so thank you for showing that. Well, we already have a lot of questions already.
Great.
So, um, so before we take those questions, could you please maybe just we'll take some Dramamine so we don't get too seasick. But could you give us a little bit of a tour around your workshop?
Yeah, sure. Guitar building workshops are a lot like a kitchen you have your tool tree and those kind of things. So this room, I have two rooms, and this is where I do about 95% of my assembly and detailed work. And I'm a fairly modern builder, but I do use things like good old-fashioned planes and chisels and stuff like that. That's really a lot of fun to do. But I also use power tools. So I'm going to take you into the other room, which is like the machinery room, where I do a lot of the heavy cutting. And it's sectioned off for a good reason, because I tell you, guitar building is not glamorous when you have all this sawdust going around. So in this cutting room, you could see a pretty big table saw, which does a lot of the bulk cutting. I have a band saw, which cuts curves. And I have, like a lot of American builders, we use handheld routers. A router is something that is has a cutter on a spindle that runs at high speed. And so instead of using a lot of hand saws and stuff to shape something like a head, I could make a template, a homemade template. These are all custom made by myself. And the template guides a bearing on the cutter bit. And so in just a matter of seconds, I can cut a head to high precision. And a lot of the things that you assemble or cut for a guitar, it has to have an accuracy of 0.5 millimeters or better. Your eye can see a difference of 0.2 millimeters. So if your cuts aren't good, you can see that on, say, binding and purfling. Or intonation is a matter of fractions of millimeters. So that's kind of the level that I'm working on. It's very different than, say, a furniture maker. In this cutting room, I also have, in the back there, that is a drum sander. It has a spindle with abrasive on it, and it has a conveyor belt, and you can raise and lower the arm of the abrasive and make veneers of on the order of, say, 0.6 millimeters thin or less, and that's how I make double top guitars. So I'll go back in the other room, and so that's the equipment, but then the analogy of a kitchen would be, this would be the pantry, where you got all the goodies. I have all the wood here. This is mahogany from Central America for necks. I have spruce bracewood. And lots of spruce. This is spruce from British Columbia, Canada, and also European spruce from the Ukraine. And then in the back here, these are all the really expensive woods. Rosewoods. These are hardwoods that come from tropical regions. And Brazilian rosewood, Indian rosewood, and alternatives to those. Lots of great woods are still available. Very, very beautiful woods. And a lot of western red cedar too. So I use spruce and cedar equally. And in fact, in my double top guitars, I have about a 50-50 mixture of spruce and cedar in these double tops. And you can start to do interesting things in blending the sound and response of tops. So this is the fun area to always look and feel. It never gets old. I like to pick it up every now and then dream of the next guitar and which piece is going to be used. Then I have things like custom-made side benders. Instead of using a hot electric pipe or gas pipe, I have, you see this floppy orange thing is a heating blanket that has its electrical heating elements in it. I plug it in, it goes up to about 300 degrees. I can bend very stiff rosewood pieces by just spritzing a little bit with water and then cranking down the screw press. And then I have these shoes that bend the slat of side over the form. So you can see that this is something you can't buy. You have to make if you want your shape to be individual to you. The whole idea is to be under control for every process and have it the way that you want it designed. At least that's the way that advanced building goes. And then this is a deck that's used for bracing. And it's just a very simple idea. If you have your brace down here, this is a cedar brace, and I wanted to glue it to the soundboard, I would simply use the roof of this deck and pin it between, well, with a very simple dowel, a flexible dowel. And you can put down and glue tons of braces at one time without having to use clamps. And then speaking of clamps, you can't do this kind of work without lots and lots of clamps. They're not big like you would in furniture, but they're micro scale to mid-size. So clamps become a very important thing because gluing under the right conditions becomes a really, really big deal as far as the stability and the way that a guitar can manage different humidity extremes. I'm sure there are questions about that somewhere in the feed.
There are so many questions already. Let me just get it.
Take some time and figure out which ones we should hit.
All right. Yes, I will. Well, thank you for showing us around. There's a lot of people saying that it's amazing, and I think it's just. I mean, we love seeing all of this stuff because it's something we don't rarely get to see, but we are in love with the materials and the end result, and so I think it's really fascinating to see inside the process. All right, so there's also some questions that are very broad because
Okay.
you entail entire lectures. Well, Jeff Chan had a question way back even before we called you up. So
Okay.
because for his diligence, we will go straight to his question.
Yes, let's take Jeff's.
Does a 2 or 3 piece back make a difference in sound? Some luthiers make arched backs. Does that make a difference?
Okay. The number of pieces of a back. Well, just on a theoretical concept, it's resonant properties. We're talking resonance. Resonance is something, a property of something that vibrates, that moves back and forth. And vibrating materials, that vibration, the sound, what we register as sound is really air being pushed by this vibration of air from, say, the back to our ears. Okay, so the property that dictates the sound that we're hearing is influenced by the stiffness and the weight of that vibrating body. So getting to this 3-piece top, if the pieces are glued together such that they behave as one plate, which they should not sound any different than a back that is 2-piece, that is glued together. Now, the standard is you would have a 2-piece, and 2-piece, you have 2-piece because trees aren't usually wide enough to get a whole guitar back out of it. And it also gives you the ability to have symmetric properties of stiffness. Okay, so assuming that they are joined and they act as one piece, if the luthier chose and can control the same stiffness and weight, or some ratio that gives you the same stiffness to weight ratio, they should sound approximately the same. So this is the whole ball of wax for building guitars, and the top is the most important as far as getting the sound. So even on the grand scheme of things, backs are very low on the priority of giving you the sound. But the same theory holds as far as manipulating the stiffness and the weight and the spatial distribution. So that's what guitar builders are trying to do when we build a top, is we are engineers in stiffness, weight, and location of that property. And that directly affects the sound. That's why a guitar of the same material and perhaps the same dimensions and even thickness, if those materials were cut from a different tree or a different section of the tree, they will sound different. So it's very difficult to generalize even spruce to spruce or spruce to cedar because we don't know, and we usually can't measure stiffness and weight and distribution of those things in assembled guitars.
And I guess a bit of a follow on from that, also from Jeff, is about for a double top guitar, does it matter if the cedar is outside versus the spruce? Like, does the and maybe for people that don't know what a double top is or how those two woods would be part of a soundboard, could you maybe talk about that?
Sure, because this is a really interesting question and something that really floats my boat as a scientist. So let's first talk about double tops. So a solid top guitar is just one piece of the same type of wood, and you put braces on it. Like this would, this is a solid top. Okay, it's about 2.3 millimeters thick.
Oh, sounds like we have. Sounds like we have a network connection issue.